All right, we are live. Hello, folks. Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. It looks like folks are coming in. So it's great to see everybody's able to join us this evening. We're going to get started in just a few seconds. Sometimes once we open our virtual door, it takes just a bit to get everybody through that door. So hang tight with us right now while we get everyone in and we start to see our attendance numbers slow down. So probably just maybe 15 seconds more and we will get started. All right, it is looking like it's slowing down so people are able to get into the room with us. So we'll get started this evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Michelle Bird. I'm the Public Affairs Director here at Larimer County. I am going to be your Zoom hostess tonight. So really that makes me part IT, part facilitator. I'm going to run the meeting, make sure everything happens on time, make sure that everybody gets to speak when it's their turn, make sure we get your questions answered as well as we can. So I'll be kind of running the show this evening. I want to start out by letting you know how the evening is going to go, how we're going to spend our 90 minutes together. I'm going to start out by explaining to you guys how to use the Zoom platform if you have not used it before. Also, for those folks that are on the phone, it looks like we had a few people call in. We'll explain to you how you can engage with us tonight because we do want this to be a two-way interaction and not just us talking to you. Our Department of Natural Resources staff, you'll see a lot, have joined us here this evening. They have a presentation they've planned that's going to take maybe about 30 minutes. And then we're going to open the rest up for Q&A session. So I hope that's why you guys are here. We did have quite a few of you submit some questions beforehand, and that is wonderful. We're going to start out Q&A by addressing a bunch of those questions. We're not going to address every single one that was submitted. A lot of them were a lot alike. So we're going to hit on the main topics. Hopefully that answers a lot of the questions that you came with tonight. But if not, we will open it up for Q&A after the presentation. And then we'll be done for the evening. So a little bit about the Zoom platform. First of all, we use Zoom webinar for these types of occasions versus what you might be used to, which is Zoom meetings. You'll notice you don't have a chat box at the bottom of your Zoom window. You'll see that there's a Q&A box. That's going to be the best way for you guys to interact with us tonight, really because of speed. We have a lot of people here tonight. I'm going to guess we have a lot of questions that we're going to try to address as many as we can. If you type stuff into the Q&A box, our staff here is going to be monitoring those throughout the course of the evening. They will either type in an answer and get that to you, or the question that we're getting asked a lot, if a lot of you have the same question, or if it's a question that maybe has a more complicated answer that it's not suited to type out an answer, those are going to be the ones that we address tonight. Again, I don't know if we're going to be able to answer all the questions. It just might not happen. There's a lot of folks very, very passionate about our Horsetooth Reservoir and the uses on it. And we know that there's a lot of interest, and we will do our very best to answer all your questions tonight. If we don't get to your question, luckily this platform actually saves everything for us, and we'll know if we answered it or not. We're going to get back to you. So we're going to email you at that email address that you registered with the answer to your question if we did not get to answer it tonight. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. If you just want to leave a comment, maybe you don't have a question, maybe someone says something and you really like what they said and you just want us to know you agree with that person, go ahead and use that Q&A box and just put that comment in there. Let me know this is a comment to agree with Daylan or a comment to agree with Bob. And put that in that Q&A box. I'm going to make that live for everybody to see. Our goal is to be as transparent as we can tonight. And then I was going to say, please know again that all of your questions are being logged for us to keep and get back with you on. I do see a few people that have called in. I'll walk you, once we get to the Q&A section, I'll walk you through how you can engage with us. We will take some people speaking verbally tonight. Not everybody can use the Q&A box. We probably won't do too many questions that way. They do tend to take up more time. But we know there's some people uncomfortable using Q&A, so we'll take some verbal questions tonight. Once we get to Q&A, I will walk you guys through how you can ask questions verbally. Final thing is, I just, again, to reiterate, the Q&A box is the best way to either give us your questions or your comments tonight. So with that being said, we are going to start off this evening with a poll. No, we're not. We are going to start off with some staff introductions is what we're going to do next. So I want to introduce you guys. You've met me already. I want to introduce you guys to Daylan Figgs. Daylan is our Natural Resources Director. Daylan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you do, and then we'll introduce the rest of the staff before we move on to the poll.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, all. I'm Daylan Figgs. I'm the Director for Larimer County's Department of Natural Resources, and I'll be the one giving a bulk of the presentation at the start of the meeting. Thank you all for being here, and look forward to our conversation this evening.
I can go next.
Yeah, go ahead, Corey.
I'll go next. Corey Johnston here, Community Relations and Public Information Supervisor with Natural Resources. And I'm here to kind of listen in, take notes, hear what you all have to say, and look forward to the conversation and dialogue tonight and the future ones that we're going to have together this summer.
Thank you, Corey. Mark, how about you're next?
Hi, good evening. My name is Mark Coughlin. I'm the District Manager for the Horsetooth area. I've been with Larimer County Department of Natural Resources since 1995. This is my 27th year with the county, and I've been in this position since 2001.
Thank you, Mark. Megan, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. My name is Megan Flanagan, and I manage our Land Acquisition, Planning, and Resource Division here at Larimer County Natural Resources. Looking forward to the evening with you all.
Thank you, Megan. And last but not least, Zach.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Zach Wiebe, and I'm a Planning and Natural Resources Specialist with the department, and I'm looking forward to this evening's conversation.
Thank you, Zach. Now that you guys know who you're seeing on your screen, I'll let you know we will have one more staff member joining us later on this evening. She was running a different meeting that lasted until 6:30. So you will see Sydney jump on and join us. She is just going to help myself and Corey kind of do some of the administrative Zoom stuff with so many participants. It's a little hard for me to handle it all on my own. So you'll see her pop in here, and I just wanted you guys to know whose face you were seeing. So now we're going to start with the poll, and we're going to poll you guys a few times. I'm here at the beginning of the presentation and then a few times throughout the presentation. So let me pull that up. And what I will do is I will read it out. We're going to launch the poll. All right, here is our first poll question. Horsetooth Reservoir is a vibrant recreation hub for Northern Colorado. In a time of continued population growth and I can't even talk already because I'm nervous, there's so many of you. All the challenges of the park being loved to death, what do you value most about Horsetooth Reservoir? You guys can choose multiple things, so go ahead and pick all the things that you all value about Horsetooth Reservoir. We'll give you a few seconds to answer. I'll see when the answers slow down. There is a clear winner, so you better vote now if you think your choice is not going to be the winner. All right, we are getting pretty close to having everyone vote. We'll give it maybe 10 more seconds and then we'll end the poll. Last chance. All right, we are going to end the poll now. All right, and I'm going to share the results so everyone can see those results. And it looked like our top response was recreation close to home. Very closely followed, well, maybe not very closely, followed by natural environment. Then safe and enjoyable experience, and finally solitude. So I'm going to stop my share results. And I am going to turn it over to Daylan. And I'm going to ask, just so you know, as Daylan starts his presentation and his introductory words, the rest of us panelists, we're going to take off our video, mostly so you can focus on Daylan and his presentation and we don't become a distraction for you. We will all come back once Daylan is done with his presentation. So Daylan, take it over. And you are muted, Daylan, because that's how every Zoom meeting starts, right?
I'll unmute first, then I'll share my screen.
That's the way to do it. All right.
There we go.
Sounds good.
Well, good evening, everyone. As I stated before, I'm Daylan Figgs. I'm the director for Larimer County's Department of Natural Resources. And I want to first just thank everyone for joining us tonight to really the community forum around Horsetooth Reservoir. And tonight, obviously, we want to chat about Horsetooth. More importantly, I really want to spend some time talking about some of the challenges that we are beginning to face at Horsetooth Reservoir around increasing levels of visitation, and really more important to that, increasing challenges to ensure a safe public experience at the reservoir. One of the things that we always do, and all of the decisions that we make are really based on public safety. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight, and we're going to talk a lot about the challenges and the need for this conversation. When we look at the poll, a lot of us share a lot of common values around Horsetooth, recreation close to home, that safe and enjoyable access to the reservoir are really important to us. And 2020 enhanced that for many of our visitors. We saw trends in 2020 of increased visitation. And with that came challenges around public safety. Now, I don't want to frame this in the negative. These are positive outcomes for us as a community. As all of us began to face the challenges of COVID and all that what 2020 brought, we saw that people began to seek the outdoors, really finding ways to recreate close to home, as many of you indicated, find places of solitude, find their own well-being. And these folks who visited Horsetooth are really our friends, they're our neighbors, our colleagues at work, really people who reside within our community. And that's a positive outcome. To have a recreational amenity, a community asset like Horsetooth Reservoir close to home is a tremendous value to Fort Collins and to Loveland and to Larimer County. And that's very positive. The challenge we face are with that increase in visitation comes increased challenges around public safety, how to accommodate this growth. And our jobs as public land managers is to address that. We saw at Horsetooth, specifically Setanka Bay, some challenges with public safety, and we responded to that. That's our responsibility to do that. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. And in fact, I would say if we didn't respond to that, if we didn't recognize the safety challenge as it is, it would be irresponsible of us to do so. And so with that in mind, with that focus on public safety and public safety for all, the one thing I do want to point out is we don't prioritize any one recreational use above the other. We prioritize safety, and we prioritize equal access to the reservoir as much as we can for everyone. So with that in mind, with that framework of decision, I made a decision this year to restrict motorized access to the west side of Setanka Bay. And this decision was really based on that public experience, that public safety outcome, and really a safe experience for all who recreate here. Now, once that decision was made, many of you reached out to voice your input, and both positive and negative, really around that separation of use of Setanka Bay, that separation of motorized boats from paddlecraft. Now, looking again at the poll results, looking at the values that we share, like many of you, I support that recreation close to home. I support that safe and enjoyable outcome. And I think the decision that was made, keeping that separation of recreation use to focus on better public safety, was the right decision to make. It's focused on our goal of overall public safety for everyone who comes to the reservoir. But with that said, the process leading up to that decision, not having this community conversation around the need for that change, not having this public dialogue around the change itself is the part I got wrong. That needed to happen. That needed to happen before the decision. And for that, I apologize. That mistake was mine, and that's the one I made. Now, if I could go back and turn back the hands of time to when that was, I would, but I can't do that. But what I can do tonight is restart that conversation, start the conversation we need to have. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we're here tonight to do. So really, this is an opportunity for all of us to really reopen the dialogue around Horsetooth Reservoir, specifically around those concepts of public safety. How do we embrace this growing use of our public and visits to Horsetooth, maintain that level of safety we all desire? Now, this is a community conversation. Horsetooth is a valued asset to Larimer County and a place where a lot of people go, over 1 million people. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And so it really comes down to the community helping us, working together, finding solutions as we move forward. We're going to propose tonight a few short-term and long-term solutions, not necessarily for implementation, but really to get some input around. And I bet each of you have ideas and concepts you've been working on that we would love for you to share as well. See, this isn't something that we're going to solve on our own. This is something that we're going to need your help to help us solve. These are complex challenges in front of us. Now, if one thing I do want to be clear is tonight really is the start of a conversation. This is the start of a conversation that around a decision made at Satanka Bay that many support, many don't support. Start of a conversation really around larger issues. Satanka Bay is kind of a symptom of a challenge that's in front of us around increasing congestion, increasing visitation, managing that with an eye towards safety. We're not going to make a decision tonight. We're going to listen. We're open to the dialogue, and we are open to modifying that decision around Satanka Bay. There's no question about it. I think we can come up with a better solution working together. But tonight is really about gathering information, gathering input, gathering ideas. And then we're going to report all this back at the end of the summer. This community conversation really is intended to start tonight, but not to end tonight. This is really the introductory part, sort of chapter 1 of a long book. Over the summer, as you recreate at Horsetooth, as you have friends recreate at Horsetooth, and you see challenges, you come up with solutions, we're going to provide a way for you to be able to do that. There's an online platform, an online feedback engagement platform that we're going to open up for this purpose, and it allows you a chance to communicate with us all summer long. At the end of the summer, we're going to come back and report all that. And that's the process before us. The challenges we face are only going to get more complex, and they're not going to go away. We're going to talk a little bit about why we believe that to be true. And so together, I think we can work and find our way around the end. Will we make changes to Satanka Bay for those of you who are here tonight for that? Absolutely. I don't think we got it quite right. I think we got it close, but I think there's some changes we can make. We've already got some great suggestions. We want to continue working on that. And if we make a change, this fall would be the soonest we would implement that. And certainly anything next spring would be discussed at the same time. I also recognize that many of you are here for reasons that really aren't as related to Satanka Bay as others. You know, congestion, traffic, other issues in neighborhoods that are being impacted by increasing visitation rates. And we'd love to hear from you as well. That's part of this community conversation. It isn't about Satanka Bay, it's about Horsetooth. Part of it is Satanka Bay, but it really is that larger conversation around the community. And again, we want to hear from you. We want to understand the challenges you face and ideas that you have. So again, this is really a community conversation around a community, a reservoir within our community that we cherish. And so to start all of this, I want to spend a little bit of time recapping 2020 and looking back in time and really putting a little bit of context to some of the statements that I made earlier about this trend is not going to go away. So first and foremost, safety is our top priority. The decisions we make, how we view issues in front of us is through the lens of public safety, each and every time. We think of Horsetooth as our local reservoir out our back door because it is. Horsetooth is also the third busiest reservoir in the state of Colorado behind Chatfield and Pueblo. We host over 1 million visitors a year, visitor use days a year at Horsetooth Reservoir. And this is a very conservative number, and part of these numbers came pre-COVID. We also know, when we look at visitation rates in 2020 compared to 2019, we saw an increase of 25 or 35%. And that's a big increase when you're thinking about 1 million visitors or visitor use days per year at a reservoir. That's a big number of people. We also recognize that a lot of the folks who visited Horsetooth Reservoir are new because they're experiencing the outdoor, maybe not for the first time, but coming back after maybe a departure in time. And this trend is not unique to us. There was a study that was recently done by the Outdoor Industry Association that sort of looked at new users to outdoor activities and found that new users are largely motivated by these outdoor opportunities that are accessible reasonably close to the home. They pegged it at around 10 miles from their home. If you think of Horsetooth Reservoir in proximity to our urban centers, 10 miles is a pretty big radius. You double that 30, to 30 miles, 20 miles. Horsetooth, Loveland, a lot of other folks are within that radius. And it doesn't just stop there. Our regional population is also growing. We are going to add around 150,000 people to Larimer County, to northern Colorado in the next 20 years. We're going to grow from about 350,000 to a little over 500,000 people in the next 20 years. To put it in other context, about another Fort Collins size group of people in Larimer County, likely moving predominantly into the urban centers. So not only are we seeing new users, we're adding new users every year. Another study we looked at is a study that's conducted by Colorado College every year, and it's called The State of the Rockies and Conservation of the West. And it's a great study, and we'll provide a link to it. And that study looked at the use of public lands, and they found that the majority of the public indicated they plan to visit public lands more in 2021 than years prior. So when you combine all of that together, new users turning out in numbers we haven't seen to recreate outdoors, adding a lot of new people to Larimer County in northern Colorado over the next 20 years, and with this trend of increased visitation to public spaces, really points the arrow toward this is here to stay. COVID may have sped things up, maybe sped up impacts that we saw, but it's not the only factor that we can consider. This new norm of management, this new norm of challenge is really here to stay, and is only going to grow in complexity and magnitude. And it's not just us, it's all our peers up and down the Front Range, all of our peers across the country. We all at the local, state, federal levels are really challenged with this growing use of our outdoor spaces. And again, it's a positive outcome. It's positive that people are going outside to find their place in nature, much like you and I do all the time as well. And so tonight we're going to start talking about some of the responses. I'm going to start with our immediate response to all of this, and then I want to talk a little bit about some short-term ideas and some longer-term ideas, and really gauge your reaction to some of the things we're thinking of. And again, these are all driven by public safety outcomes. So when we first saw visitation begin to increase within our public space, not just Horsetooth Reservoir, but really through our system. Tonight we'll focus on Horsetooth. One of our immediate responses was to begin to increase our own staffing. The more staff that we could get out into these landscapes to interact with our visitors, boat rangers, seasonal rangers, maintenance staff, communication staff, it really helped us manage the expectations of our visitors and begin to communicate ways of safety, helping direct traffic, helping direct visitation. We did a lot of work around signage and parking and visitor flow through our protected spaces, our properties. We added no parking signs along county roads, both in terms of good neighbor policies, trying to minimize impacts to surrounding neighborhoods. I'm sure many of you are here to talk about that. But also to create a safe passage for people to wherever their destination on the reservoir was. So they're not walking in traffic or walking across traffic. It's getting that traffic flow right. Constantly, we're reconfiguring parking spaces really for that same outcome. How do we get better traffic flow, better pedestrian flow through our properties as people seek that destination? We're working on our boat inspections, our aquatic nuisance inspections to speed boats through again in a safer manner. So there's a lot of internal changes we began to make right away. We also turned a lot of people away from our reservoir parks. We knew we were at capacity. We knew we were past capacity many days, and we started turning people away. We placed signs out along the approaches to each of our reservoir parks, basically telling people we were at capacity and asking them to turn around. Not everyone heeded our warning, but we turned around hundreds and hundreds of people on busy weekends. The other thing we did is we began to limit our own concessionaires, and this will continue as well. We have one stand-up paddleboard rental, one rental boat concessionaire, and we still have the ones of each because not everybody who wants to recreate the reservoir has the equipment they need. We want to provide that ability for them to get that, but we also want to not add too much to our own congestion issue. We want to create that ability for people to recreate, but not do it at an overcapacity level. And then the other things we're doing are really suspending special events and pavilion rentals on summer weekend days. We're adding to the congestion. And we also know that we can't guarantee places for people to park because of just the other use that we're experiencing. And then the last thing we really focused on were really this increased presence and this increased focus on messaging. A lot of the new users especially were coming to our spaces, coming to Horsetooth Reservoir, and they weren't quite sure what to do, where to go, how to act, and even what safety measures they should consider. And so we really began messaging around that, helping people understand what that safe experience should look like. We did this in a variety of ways: social media campaigns, on-site presence. The one limit we had, unfortunately, in 2020 was the use of our volunteers in the way that we typically do. We couldn't really put a lot of our volunteers into the public and keep them safe. Now, this year, that's going to change. You're going to see a lot more presence in parking lots, at boat ramps, and places where people congregate. And it really will be focusing on some of that messaging around safety vests, whistles, ways to be safe during their visit, creating a kind of a communication campaign around public safety. So that was our immediate response. I sort of liken it to building the car as we were driving down the road. We were doing this in real time, trying to find ways to really focus on the public safety challenges that we saw. And then we got through 2020 in that fashion. But it doesn't really end there. And this is really the part of the presentation that we're going to start soliciting some input and feedback through some polling. And so we know this is an issue that's not going to go away. We have new users, we're adding new users. All the indicators are people are going to continue to come to Horsetooth, and places like Horsetooth in increasing numbers. And again, that's a good outcome as long as we can focus on public safety. So some of the short-term solutions that staff have identified that we want to spend some time focusing on, and we definitely want to spend time tonight getting your initial thoughts on really that gut reaction to these ideas around these short-term solutions geared at increasing public safety. The first one is separation of use. As many of you know, we created a separation of use at Setanka Bay. Paddlecraft on the west, motorized boats on the east. Should we continue the use of that concept? Now, when I say that, there's a couple of different ways to do it. There's a separation by location or separation in space, and that's what the current Setanka separation looks like. It's in Setanka Bay, when the boat ramps are open, there's a separation that occurs there. Paddlecraft one side, motorized boats on the other. You could do the same thing in time. We could restrict down the time that separation of use occurs and focus on peak use seasons, Memorial Day to Labor Day, for example. And I think that's where we can begin to modify and tailor fit some of these solutions to fit our needs at Horsetooth Reservoir. Again, it's got to be a safe outcome for our public, but I think there's some changes that we can make. And I think we can begin to initiate some of those changes this fall once we see how it works. One of the other short-term solutions we are going to focus on quite heavily this year is really continue our emphasis on why folks really need to wear life vests and life jackets, and the importance of that, especially for those with paddlecraft And if they leave really the safety of the bank areas, anywhere on the reservoir is a safety matter. But if they're in the middle of the main body of the reservoir, it's critically important that they have personal flotation devices. And we're going to be very strict about that, very low tolerance for those who don't have safety gear. As importantly, we are going to increase and target our messaging around that, really making sure folks both not understand what the rules are, that the fact they have to have those with them and on, but also the reason why. It's really the why, and understanding the challenge that they can face and they get into the main body of the reservoir where there's a lot of boating activity, a lot of skiers, a lot of other activities going on, and they're not all that visible. And so we really want to focus on that as well. We think we can create a safer outcome that way. Another one of our short-term solutions is really this increased focus on outreach, signage, and messaging, and really, again, raising the level of awareness, raising the level of understanding around the importance of knowing the situation before you go, the expectations of when you get there, turning around when it's full, all of the things we talked about tonight, really an enhanced focus on that. One of the heavier lifts we've identified in this next 1 to 2 years, I'd love to get some feedback on tonight, is should we require paddle crafts to be registered with a permit? Is that a step that we need to take? Begin a registration process on paddle craft. And the last solution I'll present tonight is really this idea around this visitation management, this flow of traffic through our current properties. There are ways that we think we can improve parking circulation and access to the current parking lots that we currently have. But it's going to cause a little bit of disruption in the system and create a little bit of familiarity. I didn't say that right, but you know what I'm saying, through our system. And is that a way that would be an acceptable approach to public safety? Now I'm going to turn you back here to Michelle in just a second to conduct our second poll on these solutions, because I'd love to get your initial feedback. But before you do that, I just want to be clear on a couple of things. One is, these are ideas that staff have. This is by far not an exhaustive list, and I'm sure each of you are standing or sitting out in Zoom world with an idea that you'd like to share as well, and we would love to hear it. The online platform that'll open up has an idea board. And we would love to hear and to watch or have you post your ideas on that platform and share them. Second, this is really kind of an idea board for us. Anything that moves forward comes with this same public conversation. We've already at one time got out ahead of us and made a change without really having the right conversation. And we don't want to repeat that mistake. I don't want to repeat that mistake. So these are ideas that if we move forward only with the public conversation that comes along with them. And I just wanted to be clear about and transparent about that. So with that, I think Michelle is going to open up the poll.
I am, and I'll just say here before I open up the poll, we're getting a lot of comments and questions on these exact different ideas and why we haven't implemented them or implemented them. Or have we thought about it? So I just want everybody to know that we're seeing your questions and we'll get to those here once we get to the Q&A section. So with that, let me launch the poll regarding safety improvements, and I will read it out loud. Which strategies could improve the safety on the reservoir in the next 1 to 2 years? Again, you have the option to choose all that apply. So with that, separation of use, so kind of one of the topics I know a lot of you are talking about in the Q&A is separate paddlecraft only from motorboat only. Separation with time, designated zones to go into effect during specified months, Memorial Day to Labor Day. Continued emphasis on current regulation to wear PFD, so that's a personal flotation device or a life jacket at all times, and increased targeted public safety messaging associated with personal flotation devices use in water safety. Requiring paddle crafters to have a permit. Increasing the quantity of stewardship outreach, including signage and public messaging. And then improved parking circulation and access to current lots. Right, so it looks like we're not quite at 50% of the folks have voted yet. I'll let you know, I don't know if this matters to anybody out there, but we do not track how you voted, so all of your votes are anonymous. We don't associate those votes with any person. So feel free to vote in the way that you are comfortable with voting. And again, don't forget you can vote multiple times if you like. All right. I'm going to give you guys about 15 more seconds to finish voting. And looks like it's really slowing down. So I am going to go ahead and end the poll. All right, and now we're going to share the results. So it was actually fairly close at the high end with the number one response. Oh, it looks like actually we tied for the odds. So continued emphasis on current regulations to wear life jackets and personal flotation devices. The other one was to improve parking circulation and access to current lots. Pretty closely followed by separation of use and signage. So with that, we will stop sharing the results and go ahead and continue on, Daylan.
All right. Well, thank you all for providing some feedback on the poll. It was very, very helpful. And one of the things that I think jumped out at me is looking at that poll, or there are some easier to implement solutions. And those are the same ones that tended to be sort of identified in the poll as sort of the leading ones. And we certainly will be focusing on that as well as the other ideas that we had. So I appreciate it. And again, before any of this would roll out, this will be part of the conversation we'll have toward the end of the summer in September. So with solutions, we've talked about what we've done to date. We've talked a little bit about some of the lower hanging fruit in the next 1 to 2 years. I want to talk about a little longer term, because again, the challenge that we face is only going to increase and it's going to stick around. And so we've also identified some longer term solutions that we would like to begin vetting with you and getting some thoughts on as we move forward in time. Again, these are a little heavier lift for us as a department. This would require some changes in technology and how we approach issues. But I want to walk through each one of these as well. So the first one is kind of utilizing technology differently. And we see this happening more and more often in the Front Range, where there are timed entry or reservation systems being put in place for these high use areas. Rocky Mountain National Park, Brainerd Lake, putting them in more recently, Hanging Lake having a reservation or timed entry system available for quite some time. These are commonly used. And the question tonight is really, should we begin thinking about how and when we would use this type of technology to manage capacity crowds at places like Horsetooth? Another change that we are asking if we should consider are really setting a cap in the number of permits available for paddlecraft. If we have a permitting system, should we cap that at a number that meets our capacity at Horsetooth Reservoir? And the same for boats. Should we set a cap for those as we allow boats on the reservoir? Setting the cap for these uses lend themselves well to timed entry and reservation systems. You can manage it all at the same time. But is it something we should consider as a package, or is it something we should consider in some fashion? Another topic that has come up are future parking lots for access. We have at Satanka Bay, for example, a parking lot that we have on our capital project, a parking lot that we would like to build for seasonal use for boat trailers and other access. Now, it's not a parking lot to necessarily focus on adding capacity. The parking lot is really intended to better manage the capacity that we have, better manage that visitor flow in and out of the park. Should we be thinking about those types of activities? Now, at Horsetooth, the reality is we have very little room to build. And Satanka Bay's parking lot may be that last opportunity. Should we take advantage of that? The next one really gets back at this separation of use question. We implemented it on a very small scale at Setanka Bay, and it allows us to sort of understand how it works. Should we think about ways of expanding that to larger pieces of the reservoir, larger areas within the reservoir? So example, could we restrict from some magic line north into Setanka as a paddlecraft only zone? And from that line to the south as a motorized only zone. We could do it by season. We could do it in a lot of ways, but is that something we should begin to think about? Last item on the list I'd like some feedback on is it affects how we enter into our reservoir parks, are really hardening the infrastructure and making access into the parks more managed by us. It's fairly easy to move in and out of Horsetooth Reservoir most days. Should we be thinking about adding gates, adding gatehouses or entrance stations, and more infrastructure to better control visitor numbers? It affects your visitation, no doubt, but it allows us ways to manage visitors that we don't currently have. Should we be thinking about those? And again, these are ideas, and each of you have ideas of your own. I'd love for you to share. And each of the ideas we have before you right now, like before, are only implemented after further public conversation. In this case, these are longer term. These aren't things we're looking to do in the near term. These are ideas that we could see taking 5 or 10 years or longer to gear up for. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back to Michelle and have her do the next poll.
All right, so my start video button was not cooperating with me. All right, so final poll question. As we finish up the presentation, we'll go ahead and launch the polling now. You folks can go ahead and read it, and I'll read it out loud. Which future strategies could improve safety on the reservoir in the next 5 to 10 years? As with the first 2 questions, pick any that you pick any of the solutions that you agree with. 1, utilizing advanced technology like timed entry or reservation systems. 2, setting a cap for number of permits available for paddlecraft users. 3, setting a cap for number of permits. It looks like we got that one twice in there. Oh no. So we'll add those up. 4 is adding future seasonal parking for boat trailers and access. 5 is additional areas at the reservoir that Department of Natural Resources will implement separation for use of paddlecrafts and boats. So keeping paddlecrafters at one end of the reservoir and boats to the other end. And then for some reason, I cannot scroll down. So give me a second to make my box bigger. And then final one is adding gates to parking infrastructure to help control visitor numbers. So go ahead and make your choices and we'll give you a few seconds. Looks like we're at about 50% of you have voted so far. We'll give you a little more time. All right. I am going to give you all maybe about 15 seconds more. So time to make your decisions. All right, it's slowing down. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. And it looks like the number 1. Well, I actually think setting a cap for the number of permits available, if you add both of them up, it's probably number 1. But that is a little confusing. Adding future seasonal parking boats for trailers and access was one of the top ones.
Michelle, we cannot see the poll results.
Oh, you can't see them?
No.
How about now?
There they are.
Okay. Adding future seasonal parking for boat trailers and access. I know that's something people are asking about in the Q&A, so we'll touch on that a little bit more. And then the next highest one was adding gates to parking infrastructure to help control visitor numbers. All right, thank you everybody for participating in our polls. Daylan, up to you.
Great. Well, thanks again all for participating in that poll um, and really appreciate the thoughts on some of the ideas that we have. And before I turn it back over to Michelle for really the next step of this evening, I want to talk a little bit about next steps because I know that's important. And so first, I just want to reiterate my thanks for everyone tonight for taking time out of your schedule and joining us in our community forum. It's an important process. It's an important opportunity for us to listen, to understand better what all of you would like to see us do. One of the things that we'll do is we're going to send you a survey and a follow-up email that's going to allow for a little more detailed feedback. Tonight, you responded to ideas that we posed in front of you. We now want to give you an opportunity for a little more detailed feedback to us and ideas that you may have. And I really encourage you all to take advantage and fill that out. It'd be tremendously helpful. We're going to run all of this engagement process through the summer. And again, as you go through the summer, please think of this as really the start of the conversation and continue to provide feedback as we go along. Ideas will come as you witness activities on the reservoir or think of things that we may want to consider, and we really want to capture that. We're going to compile and report back all this information following this busy season of the summer sometime in September, and really begin to communicate what we think our needed changes are, plans we may formulate for 2022, and really begin a conversation around that. So for those of you who are here about Satanka, if there are changes that we make to Satanka Bay, for example, changing the window of that separation of use, that would be the first time that we would really get a chance to sort of talk about that. We'll reveal that piece earlier than most. And so please engage in that. Please take the time to fill out the questionnaire. Please provide us our ideas. And so with that, again, thanks all. Greatly appreciate your time tonight. Our next section is really a chance for us to answer questions that you've posed. And Michelle is going to moderate, facilitate that part of the evening. So I'm going to turn it back to Michelle, and our other staff will come back, and we are looking forward to answering some questions. So thank you all.
Thank you, Daylan. If you want to stop sharing your screen, you're more than welcome to. Wonderful, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of you submitted questions beforehand. And so what we did is we took all those questions and we tried to identify some that, there was themes. We were kind of getting the same type of question about the same type of thing. So we're going to address those first. And then we're going to go to the Q&A section. Before we go there, I'm going to ask all of my panelists to come back to me. So turn your screens back on. I will direct all the questions for the panelists' sake and for the attendees that don't know me possibly. I don't work for the Department of Natural Resources, so I'm not an expert on natural resources in any way. I'm a moderator here. So I'm going to ask all of my questions to Daylan. Daylan is the Director of Natural Resources, and if he feels like a staff member is probably more knowledgeable about a certain topic, he's going to go ahead and ask them to answer the question. So that's how we're going to go through the Q&A tonight. Also, if you've called in and you have a question you want to ask us, we do have a way for you to participate. What you need to do is hit *9. That lets me know that you have a question for us, and I will walk you through the process of unmuting yourself once it's your turn. So that's for the people that have called in tonight, not necessarily that you're on Zoom on your phone, but you actually called the dial-in number to listen in tonight. You can participate by hitting *9, and that'll let me know that you have a question for us. So with that, we're going to start with some of these questions that were emailed originally. I will read them out loud, and I'll look to you, Daylan, to navigate us. Our first question is, I heard fishing wasn't allowed now at Satanka Bay. Boating was here first, and now we are footing the bill, and you are taking away our right to fish the reservoir. You're muted.
It looks like Mark may be having some challenges getting back on, so I'm going to go ahead and answer that. When Mark gets back on, I may reopen that question as well. But I think the short answer to that is fishing is certainly still allowed at Setanka Bay and really throughout the entire shoreline of Horsetooth. The only restriction at Setanka is access of motorized boat during certain times of the year. Other boats can be fished from, other paddle craft can be fished from during the entirety of the summer. And then motorized boats really are allowed on the rest of the Horsetooth Reservoir. The piece that is restricted to motorized boats part of the year is about 0.5% of the reservoir. So we are working hard not to restrict or prohibit fishing on the reservoir, but we are restricting that use in certain parts, at least at Setanka Bay for now. Mark, you got back on. Glad your problems were resolved. Any additions to that?
You're right. We did not restrict fishing to the west half of Setanka Bay. It's limited now to paddleboarding. So which gives, people with paddlecraft an opportunity to stay out of boat traffic, to stay out of the main body of water. So kind of serve two purposes here. One is to help kind of keep some of those paddleboarders in a safe area away from boats. And so that was one of our thoughts besides doing that. One popular option by a lot of the paddlecraft community was to completely close Setanka Cove to all motorized boating. Obviously, that wasn't a palatable answer or really a reasonable answer for us. That's what one of the reasons we came up with closing just half of it as opposed to limiting all boating to Setanka. So.
Great. Thank you, Mark and Daylan. Next question. More of a statement, but I'll ask it in question form. Boaters are paying the way for everyone. Why aren't paddle crafters paying anything when they come to the reservoir?
Yeah, that's a question we are commonly asked around many of our use groups. And one thing we work pretty hard to do is really set up a fee system where everyone is required to pay their fair share to the reservoir. So if you think about the infrastructure needed to support recreation uses, we know that paddlecraft have a lower cost to bring to the reservoir, and they do pay day use parking fee, or they have an annual pass to access, but there is no added fee. That's one of the questions we pose tonight, should there be? But we structure our fees to be proportionate to the demand on infrastructure. So if we think of motorized boating, there is inherently more demand in terms of staffing our infrastructure of boat ramps and inspection stations and larger parking lots to accommodate trailers, and try to create a proportional fee structure to capture that. So boats are paying more, but the cost to manage the boating access is more as well. So we work pretty hard to be proportional. Now, I agree, if we are spending more now on paddlecraft and managing paddlecraft because of the increased visitation, we need to visit that.
Great. Thank you, Dale.
Hey, Michelle, can I add to that?
Of course, Mark.
I think what a lot of people don't realize, when you pay your boating registration to the state of Colorado, that money goes to the state of Colorado. It does not filter down to the counties and smaller entities. So that's why state parks, for example, do not charge for boating because you're paying that annual pass. We're fortunate that we do get some funding from the state for A&S money to help out in that aspect. But that's one reason we started charging for boating, is that we just don't get that money from the states. We have to make up that revenue somewhere to help pay for our operation cost.
Hey, Mark, can you clarify what A&S means? I'm guessing there's some people that don't.
So it's aquatic nutrient species program, and it's different. It's AIS sometimes in some states, but it's a nationwide campaign to stop the spread of invasive species like zebra and quagga mussels and milfoil, some plant species. So all states are mandated to do some kind of inspections now. And I know Colorado has a very robust program, maybe one of the most robust programs in the United States.
Thank you, Mark. All right, moving on to the next question. Our group of up to 16 women over 60 years old of age enjoy kayaking at Setanka Cove and use this ramp in the dock for entry and exit. Though the new regulations don't allow this, I have been assured that we would never be ticketed for using the dock or ramp if it's necessary. Can you confirm this? He is being considered to encourage low impact activities such as kayaking and paddleboarding.
We get this question all the time because there's such a large increase in paddle sports. And that's been really the last 10 years. We've seen that just not here, but from around the country. So the question is, how do we safely get everybody, all users, in and out of the reservoir? Horsetooth Reservoir, like Carter Lake, like a lot of the reservoirs in Colorado, have very flat land, which gives us limited ways to access people from a parking lot to the water. Basically we have three main areas, Inlet Bay, South Bay, and Satanka. South Bay and Inlet Bay have large campgrounds. They have marinas, large boat ramps, and they're further distance from a cove that people could safely get to. So the question comes up, hey, how do we, it's a great question. We get this all the time. Hey, if I have a paddle craft, can I use a boat ramp? Well, you certainly can, because they're there for everybody for ease of access because the rocky and unstable terrain. That's where the conflicts arise. How do we mesh the boaters with the paddle sport users? And there is conflicts, and it's on both sides. And I see impatience on both sides of parties. It's just not the paddle boarders. The paddle boarders are kind of getting beat up here tonight a little bit, and I kind of understand that a little bit because you get certain sects of both communities they're less than patient or not, just don't know the etiquette, how they get on and off a ramp. I see a lot of boaters prepping their boats on the ramp when they should really be prepping up in a parking lot to not take up all that time and clog a boat ramp or keep their boats tied up too much to a boat dock. And everybody on here understands my frustration because they've all seen it before, or they tie their boat up too long to a dock that ties up too much time. Again, we'll see paddlecraft users take too much time to launch their boats and unlaunch their boats to take them off the reservoir. So the question is, how do we get better about doing that? How do we provide better parking areas and better access? We're starting to do that. We've implemented some new changes up at Satanka on the west side of the boat ramp. The reality is all of our boat ramps are congested. I mean, there's no really great place. Like if you go down to like some of the state parks like Chatfield or Pueblo, where they have very large flat landing areas and more flat access, it's a lot easier for them to manage these. They have these paddleboard only launch areas because they have the capacity, they have the terrain to make that happen. So those are one of the many challenges we're dealing with. And I can only imagine with the amount of population along the Front Range that everybody sees, this problem is going to get worse before it gets better. There is no doubt.
Thank you, Mark. Very good answer. And I'm going to actually just stop 1 second and ask for a favor from one of my panelists. We're getting a lot of good feedback in the Q&A section. I know Daylan asked for it. Mark is asking for it. That's kind of one of the reasons you're here tonight. I'm not going to be able to have time to go through and read out all of your comments, your really good feedback. So I'm going to ask Corey if she sees something in our questions that's really more of a feedback thing, she could just make that live so that I know it's not a question. That way I can focus on the questions. And you guys can see what other people are suggesting, right? Part of this is a conversation. Maybe you're going to see someone on here have a really good suggestion and you want to chime in and say, I love that idea. I want to make sure that we're making these live for everybody to see. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question. A lot of parking is taken up by cars with one person in them, meeting a group of people. Last year, that was even more prevalent because of the pandemic. Is there an effective way to limit the cars, but can still get people to the park that would solve a lot of the issues? For example, could there be a park and ride parking lot in town as a way to incentivize carpooling during the weekends?
I'm going to give this one to Megan as she does our planning work.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for the question. And we do a lot of regional planning with our different partners, the cities, the state, who also manage recreation in this region, west of Fort Collins and elsewhere. We also have a regional trails program in our department where we look at ways we can connect some of our park and open space properties by trail so that there's alternative transportation options. We also work with our county and the city road departments to look at bike lanes, different alternative options for vehicle or non-vehicle access to our sites. So that's a great question. We don't have anything in place now as far as park and ride, but we do consider the capacity of our sites as well. And we often, our goal is to develop the amount of parking to match the capacity of a property. So what is the capacity of boating on Horsetooth Reservoir? The number of parking spots ideally are size to match that capacity. Same with our trail systems on different sites. So great questions, and something we're constantly looking at as we develop new areas and work regionally to look at alternative transportation options.
Great, thank you, Megan. Okay, I'm going to summarize the next question because it's a bit long and I want to make sure we're using our time wisely. And I've noticed this actually, some other have mentioned this as well. Oftentimes, especially during the busy summer months, you will see folks that are clearly using water parking for trailheads or vice versa. Are there plans to discourage water users from parking in different places and the same trailhead users to park from parking in kind of the water parking lots? It seems like they've seen the same behavior probably last season as well. So are there any plans to kind of regulate that in a way?
You know, I think this one may be one for Zach Weeby. We have an ongoing management plan process for Horsetooth Mountain, and this question has come up kind of in the reverse that I know Zach is paying some attention to in that planning process. I'm going to let you take this one, Zach.
Sure. Thanks for the question. We do, you know, there is regulations that allow moving from one day use to another, but we recognize that, you know, the proximity of the Horsetooth open space and Horsetooth Reservoir can kind of cause some, you know, some cross pollination, for lack of a better term, and I wanted to share that we are currently going through an update of the management plan for the Horsetooth Mountain open space property, and we'll be launching some public outreach efforts and public surveys soon, and in fact concurrent with this effort, so that we can work to kind of address those areas where the two kind of intertwine with one another, and keep an eye out, and we'll share some links that after the meeting to give you all a chance to weigh in on the update of that plan as well.
Great, thanks, Zach. Are there plans to put up no parking signs along the stretch of the roadway on Shoreland Drive? In the past, there's been some overflow parking there.
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the biggest challenges we deal with is people parking outside of our parks. As Megan mentioned, our capacity is built around our surface acres, miles of trail, surface acres of water, and that's how we develop our capacities. And so when we build our facilities, we build in those parking lots to match that capacity. So the reason we don't allow that overflow traffic is, one, is it increases our capacity when we're, and anybody who's been up here realizes on Saturday or Sunday, even on Friday these days, how busy the park is at just normal parking capacity, let alone when people start walking in or bust in or whatever it may be. So, you know, we started adding more no parking signs along the entire reservoir, whether it's Carter Lake or Horsetooth Reservoir, because the amount of traffic people parking along county roads. One is the county road shoulders are not designed to take that kind of parking use. And still have safe passage for pedestrians and bicyclists and things like that. So there will not be additional, at this time, we're actually limiting parking along the county roads for safety reasons, traffic hazards, people getting struck by cars, whatever it may be. You know, these roads, the county roads around here are getting busier and busier every year. The people come up here understand that. The amount of serious and fatal car wrecks along the county roads, along our reservoirs are increasing. Both Horsetooth Reservoir and Carter Lake are designated as hot zones by Colorado State Patrol for serious and fatal accidents. So they've been really ramping up the last 2 years. We've been working with the Sheriff's Department and Colorado State Patrol and Poudre Valley Fire Authority and PVH or University of Colorado Health to work on a safety plan along these county roads to help limit the amount of serious and fatal wrecks and some of the traffic problems we're seeing in the last 5 years. Anybody who's been up here understands how busy it is and the amount of accidents we're seeing up here.
Thanks, Mark. Very good answer. Very good question. There's a similar question. I just want to point this out to you, Mark, if you want to address this. Susan asked a very similar question, and I'm not 100% sure about the location she's talking about in the Q&A. So if you want to type out an answer to her specifically, she has some concerns about maybe some not clear enough signage and people doing some unsafe things while they're turning around boats and RVs and cars. So I'm going to direct you at that to answer that question, Mark. Multiple people, not just the question that was submitted earlier, but multiple people today have brought up the concern of inexperienced users on the reservoir, both boats, both paddle boards, just doing things that are very unsafe and very much concerned that eventually the two will collide with tragic ends. So is there some type of educational campaign in the works to help enlighten all those new users and those new recreators on etiquette, safety, how they should interact on the water?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't.
Yes. Can I take this one, Mark?
Yes, and I'll follow up.
Okay. Thank you. I needed a break from that Q&A. Woo! You guys are giving us some great ideas and great questions. I've been working really hard this year to roll out a much more expanded safety information and public information, both on site, on the ground, and then also via our website and video production as well that will be shared via social. So there's a whole slew of safety information that's going to be kind of rolling out starting this June all the way through October. And I'm really looking forward to being able to maybe help in some way to help the new users understand that it's just simple preparation that can help them stay safe. So Mark.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not a local problem, it's a national problem. And it was, I think, exacerbated in last year with COVID. So many new people bought boats, RVs, campers, trailers, just about every manner of outdoor recreation equipment. So we have a lot of new users. In the last 5 years, just the growth in Colorado, we've seen a lot of new users come out to our parks and open spaces. And like I said, it's exacerbated last year. And so I think what we're seeing is people, just a lot of new users, boaters, stand-up paddle boarders, campers, try and buy an RV in the state of Colorado or try to rent an RV. It's almost impossible. Even the value of those things have gone up so much because there's so many new people into the sport. So that comes with its own challenges. We've doubled up. Now you'll see by and large, if you see a boat patrol on Horsetooth or Carter Lake, you'll see 2 boat rangers. It's one of the safety measures. We're going from a single boat patrol ranger on a patrol boat to 2. It's one of many safety measures we've enacted in the last couple of years because of issues, and it's going to be helpful to have Corey. We have some very targeted messaging. Hey, do you know how to use your boat? Do you know how to use your RV? Whatever it may be, to make sure when they get on the water, that's my biggest concern is not new users, is they're not educated users either. And so we battle with that. For those of you on here, I'm sure have dealt with that on our reservoirs. The lack of preparation, like Corey said, or lack of knowledge on how to use a boat safely or paddleboard or whatever it may be. So, and my guess is these folks aren't going away. They're going to, we talked about this earlier this week, Daylan brought up a good point. All these folks went to Walmart to buy their first raft or 10 or whatever. Now they're kind of hooked on the outdoors, and I think they're going to upgrade their equipment and they're going to come back. I don't think 2020 was an anomaly. I mean, we're already seeing the use this year compared to last year on nice days. So I think that use is going to continue on. Those problems be a continued issue for all of us. So more to come on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, and one thing I'm going to add to this one is, this is indeed a challenge, and it's a challenge really around public safety and safe outcomes. And so it's really a combination of things we've talked about tonight: enhanced messaging and getting information into people's hands about behavior and safety and what they need to know when they get to the reservoir. But it's also about providing a safe place for all of these new users to come. And how we do that becomes the topic of discussion. We've created that a little bit at Satanka this year. There are a lot of other great ideas in the chat room and question and answers areas about other places we may be able to do that. So it's really that combination, I think, of efforts that get at that safety need.
Right, and I would just add one more thing. I know in the survey that we are going to be launching this evening, there is a question in there about how do you best get information and what is the best way to inform you. And I am going to be looking at that and invite all of you to go in and answer based on your own preferences. That will help us in the long term as well.
Awesome, guys. Thank you. Very thorough answer. And I'm meaning to rush us, but I do want to get to some of our other questions. A lot of these questions are very reflective of the questions we're seeing in the Q&A. Final kind of preemptive question or pre-submitted question, Daylan. Are you planning on implementing a timed entry or reservation system at all? I know that's a rumor that likes to go around.
Yeah, you know, I think we may want to explore it. There's no plans to implement it. It's a difficult system for us to implement. It's a difficult system for folks to sort of wrap their arms around in its use. And even if we wanted to, say if everybody tonight decided we want a timed entry system, it's a lift for us both financially. It changes how we do business. It's not on the horizon. I think we need to start talking about it, but I don't think we need to really talk about it with the idea of implementing soon.
Right. With that, Daylan, I'm going to move to the questions that people are asking tonight. Again, there is absolutely no way we're going to get to all of these. I am just preemptively letting you all know that now. I am going to do a lot of summarizing. A lot of you guys have really great detailed background before you ask your question. I appreciate it. I know the staff appreciates it, and your expertise. If I shorten your question, don't take it personally. It is for the sake of time. So with that, and I think this is, I saw multiple people ask this question. And I think it gets back to the why we are here tonight and public safety. So I think I want us to address it first. What are the statistics regarding public safety or a lack thereof that heightens your concern for public safety? This individual does not believe that perceptions should direct regulations. Additionally, I saw a few other people say they have not actually seen any accidents. So they're wondering if maybe this is, and a whole conversation is going a step too far. So Daylan, do you have some statistics around that at all?
Yeah, I'm gonna point to Mark for part of this answer, but one of the things that we saw this year is there's sort of two pieces to this. One is as managers, we don't want to wait for an accident to happen. We want to wait for when we see the circumstance where that is getting ready to occur is where we need to make that preemptive strike. One of the things we saw this year at Horsetooth Reservoir was over 200 water rescues. So these were 200 people in distress in the water, where it was a rescue, thank goodness, not a recovery. That's one of the statistics we looked at, the congestion at the reservoir, the uptick in visitation, increased activity of rescues that we needed to do. And I'm going to let Mark talk a little bit about some of the other work that we've done on the enforcement side that led us to this point.
Yeah, I think anybody who's used the reservoirs for several years have seen the increase in visitation. In the last 10 years, it's at least double for the amount of people that we see on the reservoirs. You know, those rescues, everything from, you know, boat explosions, near drownings, you know, jet ski versus boat accident, rescuing paddleboarders or paddlecrafter in wind events. You know, we track all those to a large degree. We track all those. And, you know, one of the reasons we went from a single boat officer on a patrol boat to two was just to handle the amount of contacts that we're making. It's just not boat accidents, overall contacts for unsafe boating, safety violations, whatever it may be. As Daylan mentioned, you know, we're stopping a lot of new boaters, a lot of just boaters in general for, you know, direction of travel. You know, if you're out there on the reservoir on a busy day, you know that people aren't adhering to the 150-foot leeway you're supposed to give another boater on the water. It's almost impossible to do that on Horsetooth Reservoir on a Saturday and Sunday or in the summer months. So we're just responding. This is not a gut feeling. Some of it's professional judgment, of course, because we're here every day and we understand the trends in recreation. We understand the trends in use, and we see the accidents that are occurring, the real accidents are occurring, and what we're responding to, and how we're training our boat patrol officers and land rangers to respond to that. You know, we're acutely aware to all the safety issues, whether it be on the land or water. We talked about, you know, the issues we had on the county roads. We've seen a large increase in vehicle breaks in our parking lots. We've seen the amount of drug use has skyrocketed along our day use parking areas. So we're seeing crime occur across the board. That's one reason we started the visitor safety plan about 1.5 years ago, that we met with, you know, State Patrol, the Sheriff's Department from Larimer County, Prudhoe Fire Authority, and other public safety professionals that all respond to these incidents. You know, our calls for service for snake bites, people doing rock climbing falls, drownings, whatever it may be, are increasing across the board in both Horsetooth and Carter Lake. So we are just trying, as Daylan said, we're trying to stay ahead of this, because the reality is a lot of emergency services in Larimer County along the Front Range are falling behind, trying to get enough staff up and going to respond to all the calls for service. So this is only one really small part of the overall picture of the things we deal with just in our park and open spaces alone.
Great, thank you, Mark. Let's see. So, well, I did a little more specific question. Have we had any incidents? There is a lot of talk about boaters and paddle boarders and their interaction. Do we have instances of those two having accidents together? There are a lot of comments where they've seen a lot of near misses, but people asking, do we actually have instances of paddle boarders and motorized boaters having accidents?
So I think the question's absolutely right. They're right on point there, where there's a lot of near misses, right? And how many near misses are you gonna have before you have a fatal or serious accident? You know, we see it all the time. We see the frustration from the boaters and the paddle boarders when they're on the water. They get close to each other. Everybody understands the congestion around the docks. And that's why one of the really viable solutions that came about was, hey, why don't we just close the tank period to motorized boating, just because of the amount of conflicts we have. You know, that's not a reasonable solution to us at this time. But I think we're all going to see that increased use. The more people are going to show up, the more boaters, paddleboarders, we're going to see more of that. And do people want to do a hard number? Hey, do we have a list of fatalities or serious accidents? No, but we have a lot of near misses where it's just a matter of time before that happens.
Yeah, and it kind of gets back to that responsibility factor around public safety is, I mean, our job is to recognize when all these near misses are happening and take the appropriate action so it doesn't become, as Mark pointed out, a fatality or severe accident that we could have prevented. And in fact, it would be irresponsible for us to say, well, nobody's gotten killed. And I don't downplay the question. It's a fantastic question, but that's the approach that we've taken is this is the time to act before some tragic events occurs, or at least try to prevent that from happening with changes in how we operate. It's a great question, and it's a very good insight.
So there's a lot of different questions about why paddleboarders are not treated the same as motorized boaters. And to go with that, I'm going to kind of lump some questions together. So Daylan, I'm going to let you dissect this and figure out what's the best way to go about it. Lots of questions about why paddle boaters are not treated the same as regular boaters. And with that, why was the choice made for Sentaka Bay versus South Bay? A lot of folks have opinions that the South Bay would be a better place for that paddle board area. So what was the decision around that? Why aren't paddle boarders treated the same way? And very specifically, I'm seeing a lot of people very concerned that the personal flotation devices are not mandatory to be worn just on the paddleboard, specifically for adolescents or teenagers. So I kind of threw three things in there. Why are they treated differently? Why Sentaka? And PDFs for the paddle boarder, or personal flotation devices, PFDs.
So I'm going to answer the first question and turn the rest over to Mark.
Okay.
And I think the question tonight that we posed is, should we treat paddle boarders and boaters more similar? You know, should we begin to permit? Should we begin to put added limits on paddle boarders? Now, paddle boards do not require aquatic nuisance inspections and things like that. They're not, because they're a hand launch craft. But I think one of the questions that we are posing is, should we treat paddle boarders different than they're being treated today in the future around this increasing use of the reservoir? And I'm going to let Mark really address the rest of those issues because I know he has wrestled with all of those.
So, you know, there's always some confusion on what's required on a stand-up paddleboard or a paddle craft in general. The state of Colorado does not require people to be wearing a PFD when they're on a paddleboard, unless they're under 13 years of age. So whether you're on any kind of canoe, kayak, boat, any kind of vessel, if you're under 13 years of age, you have to be wearing a PFD that's a proper size. And also on a stand-up paddleboard, you need to have a sound producing device, just like you do on any vessel or paddlecraft. You have to have a sound producing device, which is typically a whistle. So the reason we don't enforce that now, where it's mandatory for someone to wear a PFD on a paddleboard, is not required by state law. You know, that's one thing that we're trying to ferret out here is, hey, we certainly could make that, because we can make regulations more restrictive than the state of Colorado. We cannot make them less restrictive. So but that is certainly an option. It's one that we've talked about quite a bit, and that's a change we might have in the future. So hopefully that probably answers a lot of questions that I've seen come up in the chat, at least 20 of them. So question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Daylan. I just wanted to clarify that. So you are not, the county is not allowed to require more restrictive regulations in the state. Is that correct?
No, we could require more restrictive regulations. Okay. Less restrictive.
Not less. So thank you for clarifying.
That makes sense.
Mark, why not South Bay?
That's a good question. So, you know, when you look at Horsetooth Reservoir, again, it's the third busiest reservoir in the state. The busiest place, the busiest area at Horsetooth Reservoir is South Bay, and that's for a lot of reasons. We have our visitor center here. We have our largest boat trailer parking here. We have a swim beach here. We have our largest day use area here. And we have a very large campground here, and a lot of amenities that go along with it. There's a lot of folks that access this area. So to limit stand-up paddleboarders to our already busiest area would not be possible. We create even a larger problem than we have now. Again, why not Inlet Bay? Inlet Bay has a very large marina, one of the largest marinas in the state. It has 350 total boats. We have a large campground there, and we have some day use. Question comes up, hey, why don't we allow more day use at Inlet Bay? The reason being is because between the marina and the amount of camping that we have already, there's no more room. Again, the biggest challenge I have as a park manager is I don't have any flat ground. Every square foot of flat ground you see around the reservoir, we have built. It's very impossible. So, you know, we would like to build a lot more flat ground around the reservoir, but there's a lot of challenges. Larimer County does not own Horsetooth Reservoir and Carter Lake. It's owned by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. We're limited to things that we can do, and adding more flat ground is one of those limitations that we struggle with. So if we can add more flat ground, add more spaces, like a certain space for stand-up paddlecraft, any paddlecraft, we would certainly do that, but we're just handcuffed. So the reason we narrow down to Satanka is because of the safety of the cove. Again, we get a lot of requests from folks to close down Satanka Bay completely to motorized boating. Again, we haven't gone that route, but it is a lesser of evils, let's put it that way. We don't have a lot of options. We have basically 3 options of where people can safely access the water, and those are 3. And that's how we keep on landing back to Satanka.
Great. Thank you, Mark, for clarifying that. I'm sure that doesn't necessarily, you know, it never makes everybody happy, but some clarification might be helpful for folks. I want to move, we're almost out of time already. How quickly time goes when you're having fun. I want to move a little bit away from paddle boaters, where they are, boaters, where they can go, safety issues. And I think there's an individual that makes a really good point I think we need to address tonight. This individual is a slip renter at Inlet Bay Marina. They're required to purchase a boat trailer truck pass for getting in the park. And they don't have a problem with that at all. But what they do have a problem with is having to wait in line when the park is full and people are not being let into the park. They rent a slip, which means I rent property within the park, and my property, the boat, I'm speaking for him obviously, is inside the park, yet I can't get in. They'd like to request that slip renters get a different sticker and allow access to the park. Is that something you guys have been considering, or is that something they can?
Mark, do you want to address this one?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It really brings up like kind of the crux where we're at. That we're at capacity everywhere, whether you're paddlecraft or, you know, just a day boater, or, you know, you have a boat at the marina. I think the biggest paradigm shift that we're going to all have to make in recreation, at least along the Front Range, is that you're not always going to get access. Just because you have an annual pass or something, you might not always get access to the area because there's just not enough parking anywhere. Again, how do we hold parking spots from slip customers where we're not sure if they're going to be there or not? And how do we deny access to someone who wants to come up for the day and go boating? It's a big challenge for us. And we think about this stuff all the time, but again, we're limited to flat land. And how do we manage that? I think where it's going here for us and for a lot of agencies is a reservation system of some kind. It won't happen overnight, certainly as Daylan said, but it'll take some time. If you go to larger places like California, Florida, they have reservation systems to a certain extent. But I think the paradigm shift here is that, you're going to have to really plan your times. That no longer can you go to a reservoir, whether it's Horsetooth Reservoir, Carter Lake, Boyd Lake, pick a reservoir along the Front Range. You're not going to be able to show up at 9:30, 10 o'clock on a Saturday and Sunday morning and expect to get in because we're going to be full. And I think that's the biggest paradigm shift that's coming, is that with all the people that are moving to the Front Range, we're not adding more reservoirs very quickly enough. We're not adding more miles of trail or whatever your recreation wants to be, mountain biking, backpacking, hunting, fishing, you name it. Even though the state of Colorado is 50% public land, that's all we have. And so, that's a big challenge. You're just going to have to have that little bit of shift and figure out how to plan your time a little bit better.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to put two questions into one here. First part of the question is there a maximum number of motorized boats that you guys kind of have in mind that is the capacity of the reservoir? And second question, I'm hoping maybe, Daylan, you guys can answer this in one. Is there a way, or is there a thought to be had about charging those folks that are not Larimer County residents more, or limiting how many non-Larimer County residents can use Horsetooth? And then I'm really going to have to consider cutting us off. So I'll turn that over to you, Daylan.
Mark, I know you've wrestled with some of these questions in the past. I'll let you start, and maybe I'll jump in at the end.
So it's a really good question about the annual passes and county residents versus non-county residents. We do have a differentiation. There's two fees on our annual passes. It is cheaper for a Larimer County resident than it is for a non-county resident. As I mentioned earlier, we do not own these reservoirs. They're owned by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which means the federal government, which means the citizens of the United States manage these, own these reservoirs, and their tax dollars go to manage them. So we're somewhat limited to how we could treat county residents versus non-county residents since we're on federal property. And can you repeat the first part of that question, please?
Number of boats on the reservoir.
Yes, how many folks? What's capacity? What are you guys thinking there?
So it's a great question. And there's a Coast Guard formula that we use for a long, long time. It's based on the amount of surface acres available. And we know exactly how many surface acres we have available when our reservoirs are at any given elevation at any time of the year. So we track how full our reservoirs are by what elevation it's at. It's based on footage. And we know the elevation, we know our surface acres. So we take this formula, takes into account jet skis, paddlecraft, boats already at our marinas, a wakeboarding boat versus a pleasure boat, how many acres it takes up. So we have those formulas. So we know that at capacity at Horsetooth Reservoir, we're completely full. We're allowed about 350 motorized boats. Carter Lake, I don't have that number off the top of my head. And as those levels drop, that number of boats we allow goes down. It's a good question, but we use a formula.
Okay, so there's a formula being used.
Yes.
Okay. So with that being said, I didn't get to anybody who had their hand up. So I do want to do that. Get one person in here that had their hand up and has been waiting patiently to get their question asked. Then we're going to wrap it up. I do want to say there are about 50 questions we haven't been able to even address tonight. So I'll repeat this again. If you had a question and we didn't get to it, we have your name, we have your question, we have your email. We are going to respond to your questions. So I'm going to move over to our hands raised, and it looks like Lori has, and Lori, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce your last name, but Schultz, maybe could be your last name. But you have your hand up, and all you need to do is look for your unmute button, and you should be able to unmute yourself. Are you there, Lori? I'll ask you to unmute and see if that helps find the button. All right. So it doesn't look like Lori is able to unmute herself. So really quickly, I'm going to go to the next person who has their hand up. And just for the sake of time, we did say 7:30 was our end time tonight. What I'm going to do is ask Jim Black, go ahead. I have given you the permissions to unmute yourself. You should see an unmute button in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, Jim. There you go. And please, for the sake of all of our participants, we have over 100 on here tonight. If you could be concise with your question.
No, I own a piece of property in Inlet Bay that I invested a lot of money into about 10 years ago. And I'm a local user, and I wondered if there's any priorities given to people that actually own property that spend additional tax in the Horsetooth area, and if they're going to be treated differently in terms of voting and such.
Good question, Jim. Daylan, I'm going to turn that over to you.
I'm going to start it, and I'm going to have Mark maybe finish the answer. Right now, there's no preferential treatment given to any member of the voting public, whether you live around Horsetooth or on, adjacent to Horsetooth. Because as Mark said, this is really a public resource, and to give someone a preferential access means someone else doesn't get to access the reservoir when they choose to. And so it's sort of that difficult challenge that we face with managing these highly regarded, highly sought after public resources and doing that in an equitable way. And Mark, I'm guessing you have dealt with this in the issue. Corey may as well, but anything you want to add to that?
Daylan, you covered it pretty well. And I think it's a fairness issue, right? Someone lives across the street to someone lives in town. I mean, how do we as an organization say, hey, we're going to give somebody preferential treatment, whether it be a neighbor, a boater versus stand-up paddleboarder versus a jet ski or whatever it may be. It's tough for us to do that. We used to try to work the best we can with our neighbors, and if you live right across the street and we were full parking wise, we would let the neighbor come in, drop their boat, and then go park their truck and trailer back at their residence. But now that we're so busy, just so busy, and our boat rangers so overworked out there, and for safety reasons, we had to stop that as well. So as much as we would like to accommodate some of those issues, it's becoming more and more challenging for us to do that.
Yeah, it was a great question. Thank you.
Yep. So with that, I do want to, it is 7:30 already. I want to wrap this up. So everybody who still wants a little bit of daytime left can get outside and maybe walk around the block or whatever it is. So I would like to say thank you to everyone who attended tonight. People laugh at me when I say I love public meetings, but I do really enjoy seeing engaged community members come out about things they're passionate about and well educated about. And it's very obvious here how much you all love Horsetooth and love the time you're able to spend out there. And so I appreciate that you came and were able to give your voice to us tonight and hear your very, very good ideas. Again, I'm sorry we couldn't answer all your questions. We probably would have had to do like a whole day to get through all of these very good questions. I hope what we did was hit on the main topics. I hope a lot of you got a lot of your questions answered. For those of you that have very specific questions, again, we'll get back to you on those. And I hope we can get those answered for you. I know we are going to send out via the chat link or the chat box a few links right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Daylan to close us up, talk about what those links are, where they go, what they're for, and we'll be done for the evening. You're muted. There you go.
There we go. Thank you. Well, I don't have the links in front of me, but one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that we had the links available for you to be able to access some of the resources we spoke to tonight. Certainly our online platform and some of the other opportunities to engage with us and look at some of the information we referenced tonight. So there is a link to Horsetooth all of you will receive tonight via email, and it's to the Horsetooth survey. And it's a great place for you to interact and continue this conversation moving forward. We'll work on getting questions answered, and it may take us a little time. There's a lot of them. So I really appreciate the engagement and the level of participation. It's great to see. We also will post the Horsetooth Mountain Open Space Plan. Jack Weavy referenced that tonight. And even though it's not exactly the topic of conversation tonight, it definitely is related. There's a lot of overlap, certainly in our use space, a lot of overlap at times within our parking areas. So please go to that as well. If there is an interest in participating in that planning process. With that,
Daylan, I was gonna say, Daylan, can I just add on there for folks? In the chat box now, you can find those links. We will send out an email tomorrow that has links as well. So if you're not able to grab it tonight, or you just want to wait till tomorrow to get it, you're able to do that as well. So I just wanted folks to know that those links are in the chat box right now. And if you have other questions, Corey has very graciously put her email address in the chat box. So you are welcome to grab Corey's email. And if you don't hear back about your question, oh, Corey wants to say something. Go ahead.
I just wanted to let everyone know too, that once those question and answers are all compiled, we will be posting them on this engagement webpage. So you can always go back and check at a later date, and you'll be able to see the directory of questions that we received tonight and just our answers to those.
That's great. That's I know a lot of people don't realize they have a question until someone else asks it. So
Yeah.
Guys, for doing that. I was sorry to interrupt you, Daylan. Please close us out.
Thank you. And really in closing, I just greatly appreciate all of you who took a chance to meet with us tonight and took the opportunity to do that. And thanks for doing that. One of the ways that we're going to continue to move forward is to help answer questions, help identify steps we can take, and really sort of have this engagement. I know there's some tough questions that you've posted, and I greatly appreciate you doing that. This is really how we kind of work together to find solutions. So thank you all. Please stay engaged in this through the summer. That's really the intent of the online platform. And certainly if you have questions or ideas, let us know. We'd love to hear them. So greatly appreciated all the engagement this evening, and look forward to hopefully sometime getting a chance to meet some of you in person. So thank you.
Thank you all. Take care and good night.
Good night, all.